From the rib of man you came, mother, daughter, sister, aunt. You are woman. The essence of life is birthed by you. We are all on a journey with our goals in view. Be strong, be empowered today as we present Women on Wednesday. Well, good morning to everyone, wherever you are with us on this beautiful Wednesday morning. I hope you're hearing me clearly. This tends to happen sometimes. Okay. But I'm Marissa Boyce. It's good to have you with us as we begin our journey today and get started with another edition of Women on Wednesday. I have with me Minister Andrea Harris and also Ms. Deidre Perch. Ms. Andrea Harris of Women of Excellence and Empowerment International Network, and she's also a counselor. We also have none other than Ms. Deidre Perch. She is a social work practitioner, and she is sharing our time together. We are live this morning on our Unifying Family Facebook page, and we're also live on our YouTube channel. So good morning to all of you. So if you see me slip away for a bit, I'll slip away and come back and the ladies will continue. So good morning, ladies. Good morning to you. How are you today?
Good morning, Marissa. I am well today. I'm feeling quite good. Just making sure my fan works well today, but I'm good, thanks.
Good morning, Marissa. Good morning, Deidre. Good morning to all the listeners. It's really great to be here. It is a wonderful day to be alive.
Indeed it is. I want to I want to say thanks to you ladies for joining us this morning. Thanks to you for taking time out of your busy morning schedule to join us. And this morning to all who are with us, feel free to jump on with us and just share our post this morning, our post this morning with us. Now, today we are talking about managing you. And it is interesting that we are looking at that topic today. I was actually, looking back at the last year, if I can say that. Looking back at the last year, it's been almost 2 years since we've had COVID. It's been because we really heard about it in November of 2019, and the full-fledged effects in December, and then 2019, and then really the world felt it by March of 2019, 2020. And it was a year that I think, I don't think anybody, there's no one that was untouched by COVID. And the fact that we had to deal with this meant that there was a difference in life that was experienced by all. A difference in life. So managing you in COVID. So I just want you ladies to share your journey from then till now. What was it like when you first had to make your adjustments? Go ahead, Deidre. Let's start with Deidre.
Yes, thank you, Marissa, and good morning to all of our listeners this morning. For me, COVID, the onset of COVID back in, let's say, March of 2020, when we had that, I think we had that initial lockdown, that lockdown period where everything was closed. That's for me where I stopped, more or less. It was a point where all of the hustle and bustle of my everyday life stopped. There was no rushing to get to work. There was no rushing to drop my daughter off to school. So it was a period where I actually paused, and I would be quite honest, that season at that time allowed me to stop, recharge, and rest. I remember clearly being able to exercise more frequently, something that I had neglected for a bit. And I remember also being able to do some other relaxing activities, such as adult coloring, using adult coloring books. But I really credit that initial period of lockdown for me being able to stop, rest, and recharge. And then, I mean, subsequently, when we started with online school and work from home, those other dynamics then brought other things into play. I then had to learn how to balance me working from at home as well as balancing my daughter's online activity, as well as my nephews. And my daughter, she's only 5, which means that I had to lend a lot more assistance to her to be able to navigate with her online classes. So for me, the entire COVID experience from then until now has had some highs and lows, I would say, from periods of rest to periods of another type of hustle and bustle in terms of working from home, schooling from home, being online almost constantly because church activities then became online. Any other extracurricular became online. So then I found that for me and for many others, we were spending a whole lot of time online. And that in itself can raise the stress levels of some persons. And for me, at times, it really was stressful, especially in the initial stages of trying to navigate the online school. I know maybe all of us, teachers, students, parents, we were all trying to get familiar with how to use Google Classroom, make sure we're turning in the homework and those types of things. So initially, it was some challenging experiences, but it also was that season where I was able to rest and relax a bit from the everyday hustle of being on of commuting and drop offs and so on.
The onset of COVID was really a major interruption because I probably could say I live a fast paced life, always, going. So I found it really challenging with an abrupt, unceremonious interruption where everything just stopped and I wasn't even given the right or the privilege to choose. It
Mm,
was taken from me. It was, everything just really was out of my hand, out of my control. So I now had to move by another drummer. I had to move by somebody else's beat. I could not, do my own drumming. And when you lose that kind of control, it can be challenging, very challenging. And so, because my life was a kind of marathon, kind of, always going, it was the transition to from activity to inactivity to not doing much was really a challenging transition. But I tried to navigate. I tried to look for the positives. And as Deirdre was saying, you would go walking. But then, because my husband and I, we would go walking, but then you had to be careful because it was, the curfew, and the curfew would have sent a certain time where you would have gone like a 5 o'clock, 5:30, but you couldn't go that time. And, there were lots of changes, but you tried to navigate. However, I had to get my mental state regulated also because I don't know if I could almost say was beginning to feel a little depressed over what was happening, but I started to feel out of it, sad, and not liking the fact that you can't social, even though I might not be as big a social butterfly as Lady Marissa. I love people, and I love to work with people and help people, and a trajectory of like women of excellence or King's Daughters program that you would be doing a constant routine, a constant regime every Monday, and you interact with these women, over 100 women, and that abrupt ending really left me feeling very, very drained and I mean abandoned. And I really had to work hard on me. I had to really be intentional because I saw how I could have gone into depression. I saw it. And then along with that, what had happened because it started to impact other people's lives because as a counselor, there were persons that were reaching out. So there was a lot of tele counseling going on. Because this every person started to get so overwhelmed by it. So I had a dilute I mean a influx of persons calling, they need help, they need counsel, and that too, trust me, I understood masking up more than putting on my mask for COVID. I understood, as I refer to always on this program, when that stewardess said before, anytime the pressure decreases in the cabin, the importance of putting on that mask first. And when the pressure began to decrease around me of my activity, I understood the importance of putting on my mask, because then there were others that needed help. That I was called on. People reach out, and it was like, you can't say no because you may not feel so good, but there's somebody else that really need you more than you need you right now. So it really was a major adjustment in my life, my family. I have a daughter overseas that she too was having challenges, struggling because of the change, the abrupt change, and there were lots of things that we had to navigate ourselves with. Hi, Sonia here with Worm. Good to have had you on the King's Daughter program. Yeah, and I mean that was my story. That was my story.
As we've been sharing, and I wanted to hear our different perspectives. And as I asked our viewers to share how COVID has affected you, how are some of the ways that you've had to adjust? And one of the things that we are quite aware of is that we had to adjust with the fact that um, our lives had to change, our social interaction had to change, even up to this day. The fact that Barbados is now dealing with the Delta variant and the effect that it has had, and the fact that they said it's easily a lot or easily spread, it has now put us back on a trajectory now where we're hearing that our children are now going to start with online school. And also, we have now had to put another pause, another stick, another pin. Now, for me, I'm a social butterfly. As Andrea said, I can roam. I'm not, and I guess because your different activities would cause you to roam, and I love to always have my girls, and we're jetting and we're having new experiences, only to realize that um, it was abrupt. Now, while I was still back then when Tita was functioning, I still was going to work, so I still had an outlet of going out, of getting out of the house. But the challenge was is that as much as I was going out, I was not interacting with people. So there was no one to come out and say good morning to. You come up and you probably would not even see some people as you ventured in. Probably only the guard. If you got there, you saw the guard, and and I had to recalibrate. And then I realized that we really had to keep in contact with each other, whether it was via social media, whether it was via checking calls, WhatsApp, FaceTime, to really keep in contact and keep those relationships built. Because if you didn't, you would have lost a lot of relationships. And I'm sure that a lot of people can say that they also lost a lot of relationships in the midst of COVID. And that's the reality. I think that our challenges have been such. I've also found I never thought I'd ever have to pray as much as I've ever prayed. Um, being at home with your children all the time. Not saying it was a bad thing, but I think having been with them constantly, then you're finding that you know I'm one that cooks, but you had to cook more often. You heard the
Yes.
fridge door open more often. Um, um, so then you were aware that I don't know if I can explain it, but it was just an awareness that I had that, okay, so this is really transition. Online school. So you come home from work and then you're then thrust into another sphere where you have to make sure that a teenager is online, and a 9-year-old who is definitely not engaged constantly online has to stay focused. You have
Right.
to peep and say, what are you doing? Have mommy, I'm finished and I'm bored here, or so you then found that your mind was always going. And then I had school in the evening at night. So for me, I felt as if I did not, as much as my social life was cut short, I felt as if I didn't have a break. And then too, as we went into 2021, um with the transition of work and so forth, that was a major adjustment. And Andrea can tell you, I had to try to pull myself from the depth. And I wonder how many people can be honest and say that there are times where they felt almost depressed, where they had to say, you know what, I have to um, pause and, you know, if I can say segment life, as much as we were not necessarily outdoors, life was still a lot heavier indoors. I don't know if anybody can identify with that. There's still much that felt like it needed to be done, and there was not much time to be able to still accomplish it. So I felt like I had to make some mental adjustments, if I can say that, knowing what I will carry today and what I will not carry today, knowing when to pause,
Yes.
knowing when recognizing that if you did not be intentional about your Christian walk too, your spiritual life could have fallen off so easily because you felt that you had time. So you probably knew you were getting up at 10 o'clock rather than at 6 o'clock because you would have been going to work and you would have spent your time with God. So you're like, okay, I've got time. So you had to be intentional also about my spiritual life. I had to be intentional about my relationships and also about my mental health. And I'm a big proponent of that mental health aspect because we can get so busy and so caught up, we forget how to manage ourselves mentally, and we need to be able to pay attention to that. Have any of you ever had to be through that process where you're talking about your mental health, and how to manage it, where you're now more aware of mental health? You're probably aware that, okay, this thing is bothering me, this thing is a little heavier here. Anybody had that, or was it only me? Maybe only me.
So I've had that too, Marissa. As I said, in the initial stages, the ability to pause and rest is what worked for me. But then it became hectic when they instituted work from home, and I still had to go in some days to the office because in my role as a social worker working with vulnerable populations, there was a heightened demand for the needs of social workers and social services during that those initial months of lockdown. There were persons who needed financial assistance, persons who needed food, and I mean, several things were happening that the government was rolling out for vulnerable persons. And similar to what you have said, there was a season where I really felt overwhelmed. I felt really depressed, constantly being online and trying to meet my work obligations, but still having to compete with having my daughter's school obligations met. It was a challenging season, and what I had to do is that um, after a particular time, I would just switch off all devices. So let's say by I think at one time I had the automatic shut off on my phone set for 7 p.m. because after 7 p.m. I did not want to see, hear, or touch an electronic device because it became so overwhelming. And I really had to be mindful of my mental health and my stress levels. And I had to be intentional in terms of what I can really honestly manage, and not from a perspective of shirking my employer's responsibilities or the school's responsibilities, but in terms of being honest and reflective of how I was feeling and how I was coping. I had to make some serious adjustments. And that also included taking, I think I took about a month vacation just to be able to bring myself back to a place of some balance. And I remember on a previous show, we talked about the whole concept of self awareness in mental health and managing emotions and so on. A key component of that is that issue of self awareness. You have to know where you're at. You have to know your threshold. You have to know what is elevating any negative emotions that you're having. And then you have to be intentional in doing something about it. So, yes, we would have had several challenges. Yes, it might have been different for different people. And I want to throw in here the whole issue of resilience because we all deal with issues in different ways. Um, Marissa, you shared that you would have had to deal with online school and you work in the mornings and so on. And the way how you might have dealt with that or how you might have coped with that would have been different to me, to Andrea, and somebody else's approach to it. So we also have to be very mindful that we would all deal with situations in a different way, but the important thing is that self-awareness and then the intentionality to do something about it.
As
Yeah,
you were talking before Andrea, I wondered, how when I hear Deidre speak, Andrea, it makes me think, how many of us had our work life become our home life, and our
Mm,
home life become our work life? There was really no line drawn between the separation of the two.
yeah. Well, that's what COVID did. COVID caused major interruptions in our entire lifestyle. Major. So there had to be like an abrupt transition. People had, how you have a crash course. People had to transition abruptly between managing school online, work online, those online things, and home life. Then it would have been the fact now that persons will go out every day and interact with other persons, socialize with other persons, but the same people that you live with all your life, you constantly, every time you open your eyes, you see them. You see
yeah.
them. And if you didn't have the greatest relationships, that
Mm,
the environment became even more toxic. Because you know what? I always glad when the sun rises, because once the sun rises and I have a shower and I leave this house, I see a different face. I get into a different environment that helps me. But now I am stuck. So it was now being able to navigate in those kind of environments that some persons were able to manage well, others were not, because some situations got worse, but others people were able to, intentionally try to make it work. What I discovered is being truthful about how you feel, what's happening around you, is really very critical to you starting the process of managing the environment. So living in denial will not change anything but your mental state and everything else that you will go through. So I found, and it is important that we are truthful, talk about how we feel. And at time I had to be transparent, and I say to persons, if you cut me, I will bleed. Because sometimes people put you in a particular category and they think that, you know what, oh, she has got it all together. He's got it all together. She's the perfect consummate person. She's a preacher, she's a teacher, she's a conference facilitator, she's the counselor, she's the this, she's the that. Oh, she doesn't have anything. Newsflash. Newsflash. The greater the responsibilities, the greater the challenges. So that then when you have to say, you know what, I feel sad. I went to the doctor, and there are times when you have to first of all take care. We think that our overall health is only if I feel a stuffy nose, or if I feel, my throat itching, or if I feel,
Yeah,
that,
exercise.
that yes, that those
mm,
signals, that's my overall health. So I'll get some multi-symptom, or if it is more than that, I'll go to the doctor if I need an antibiotic or whatever. But then it's not only overall health is not only physical, overall health is mental. So that not only taking care of my physical health, I understood a cold or backache or whatever. I had to be intentional about saying, girl, check
yeah.
yourself. That you don't fall off in the end. You don't go off on somebody in the house. Or you understand what I'm saying? I am being real today, because I think sometimes, talk what you like, we live lies. We live lies. We pretend, and we live lies, and we make people feel, you know what? Oh, I've got it all together. I've got a perfect environment.
Mhm.
Hey, no. Sometimes we have to struggle through some
Yeah.
difficult persons or significant others in our lives, whether it's our spouses or our children or our family members. Sometimes we got to struggle through managing relationships. And some people are not doing well at it. And I'm talking about Christians, I'm talking about believers. Some people are not coping well. But it is a decent, you have all the time home, but you don't want a prayer. Anybody know what I'm talking about? You have
Mhm.
all the time home, you
Yeah.
don't want to read word,
Yeah.
because somehow what is happening in the environment, in the atmosphere, is swamping and taking over you
Mhm.
psychologically. And we know once our minds are influenced, once our minds are impacted, it's going to impact every single thing in our lives. Once our brains are impacted, it's going to impact every single thing in our lives. So what do? We have to, first of all, be real about what we are feeling, and then look to see how best we can manage. Look for those coping. Begin to develop coping skills. And you know what I used to do. What I do a lot until today. I do word games. That helps me. So I would sit down. I would do my word game, and that helps me. That really helps me. I don't get to, I might walk a bit sometimes, go and walk the dogs with my daughter, or go walk my granddaughter sometimes. But
Mhm.
I find what I'm saying is that you have to look for something that can help you to cope and to manage. Because
Yeah.
what works for me, because we know sometimes you take medication and some people get an adverse reaction to it.
Mhm.
All right. And so it's the same thing with no trying to cope. What would work for me will not work for you. So you have to look for that mechanism that helps you to distress, that mechanism that helps you to manage, and use it to the full extent, so that at the end of the day you can be in a better mental state. And once you're in a good mental state, all the other things will fall in line.
We talked about first of all being truthful, and I think that that's one of the first things we need to do. Unmask. Yes, even though we're told to mask up, unmask where you really can say, "I don't like this. I don't like this aspect." If you can actually be able to pinpoint it, it also helps you to first realize that this is a challenge in a particular area, and being able to say that this is a challenge in a particular area helps you to then be able to say, "Okay, all right, this is affecting me." Unless you can identify what it is that hurts you, it's like going to the doctor and the doctor's asking what's hurting, and you're saying your big toe when it's your right hand. You need to be able to see that this is what hurts, this is what I don't like. Being able to address that helps you then able to be able to put, as you said, get the medication, get the remedy. So if you know you don't like being inside consistently, first you have to then identify, can I go outside? Can I go outside? Then you ask yourself, how long can I stay outside? If that's one of your challenges. But then there's some that you really don't have any control over, Andrea. Like Sandra that says, being at home, I thought the job is challenging. If you're in a household with people that you don't necessarily get along with all the time, and you have to be inside. Maybe there are other aspects of it. When you can't, when what about those things that you can't really necessarily change right off? If you can jump in, Daydream, then we'll have Andrea share. What about when you can't change those situations?
Well, that actually reminds me of me. There was a time when I wanted to just escape onto the roof of the house. I just leave the children to themselves or whatever. Um, and that's being real. And I mean, sometimes and as Andrew was highlighted, you're in a space constantly with the same people. Yes, they're family. Yes, we love you, but I need to be able to see different people or have a different scenery. I did go through that phase as well with just constantly being in the same place with the same persons and try to manage two children, my daughter and my nephew, with online school, then with other activities, and having them relax and come together. And as I said, there were times I just wanted to escape on top of the roof. And even I told them one time that I'm gonna get a ticket to the moon and see y'all when I get back. But that's real. And we have to realize, as I mentioned earlier, that we all deal with it differently. And I wanted to jump in again on resilience. Resilience really comes down to how we cope with things that are happening around us and our ability to bounce back. So yes, there might be things that knock you down. I mean, our guests in the chat mentioned about being unemployed, and yes, we know that there are many persons who are unemployed during the COVID season, and there are persons who are still unemployed. But part of being resilient and being able to bounce back comes down to how you reflect on that situation, how you deal with that particular situation. I know there are persons who would have, spent time bemoaning and being depressed, And then there were others who, out of that adversity, found small business, founded small businesses. They used their passions to bring employment, their baking skills, cooking skills, we're talking about COVID, but then subsequently we had the freak storm, the ash fall, the hurricane. So there were several other things along the way that would have impacted person's ability to manage self and others, person's ability to cope with a particular situation, and being able to turn an adverse situation into something that becomes a blessing is really what some people were able to do. And unfortunately, there were others who, as Andrea said, there are persons who needed that extra support and assistance. And that's okay. That is definitely okay. If you're not okay, that's okay. If you're okay, that is also okay. The thing is to know where you're at and what resources you would need to assist you. And for me, one of the resources was definitely digging into the Word of God even a bit more. Although there was a season where I switched offline from the online church activities because it was too much for me, but I still found the time to dig into my faith to help me through that season. And then there were other persons I would have shared my experiences with who would have helped me to talk through these situations. So finding that person or that resource that can help you in a challenging situation like COVID, being unemployed, the inability to manage everything that's happening around you, and it also reminds me of the challenge that other persons are facing. For me as a social worker, when I oftentimes when I think of myself and the challenge that I'm having, it also brings me to think of the clients that I work with and the challenges that they might be having. I might be here stressing out with one child and a nephew, but I know I have clients who have 5 children, who have 6 children, who might not have electricity, might not have devices. So it also brought me to a place of bringing some perspective to my challenges and looking at it from a point of view that, come on, Deidre, come on, Perch, relax a bit with this particular situation. There are persons who are having a much harder time dealing with the impact of COVID than for me to be even complaining. Even when we had, let's say, the impact of the freak storm in Elsa, where we lost electricity for several days, week plus for some people, again, it brought me to the realization of perspective. Um, how do you how do you see yourself now being without electricity for a week or 2 weeks when there are persons who have no electricity at all? So perspective also comes into bringing that balance in these types of situations, in these types of unprecedented circumstances like COVID.
As you're talking, it makes me think that, as you said, it's broad perspective, and like, no disrespect to anybody, but when I was thinking about all the activities that my daughters were a part of, having to get to dancing, having to get to sports, having to get to swimming, having to get to music, uh, I think it really made me realize: are all of these things necessary?
Hmm.
Uh, I'm not saying that they aren't, but I was like, okay, so one does music, another one does something else here, and another one does. I'm like, so 3, 4 evenings. So, for example, before I told my daughters everything must happen between Monday to Thursday.
Mhm, mhm,
Nothing will happen on Friday or Saturday mornings.
mhm.
That's my time. So I had to find balance because you put all of everything else into everything else. So everything happened that had to happen, unless it was a work event or something that I was involved in ministry wise. But Friday and Saturdays and a Saturday morning, I was not moving. Nope, I'm not moving before 10 a.m. because I was moving by 3:34 most mornings. So by
Right.
10 a.m. I'm not moving on a Saturday morning. And then I realized that these things really even though they add to the character of a child, and the discipline of the different activities, and because they must learn how to balance, school and different activities. I realized that a lot of these things that I was just sweating myself about
Mm-hmm.
really now
Mm-hmm.
were put into perspective. Not that they weren't necessary or they aren't
Right.
necessary, but you put them into
Mm-hmm.
perspective. And as you said that, it made me realize that the things that we stressed about, we sometimes don't need to stress about. If I can say that, the things that we said I must have, I must go and do. I really, even going to the supermarket. You only went unless you really needed to, because you really did not want to be venturing out 3 and 4 times a week. I don't know if Andrea had that same experience, but it put a lot of things into perspective.
Well, Marissa, I just didn't like the lines. From the time I turned in and I saw the line, it was reverse and go. I am so serious. I am so very serious. I didn't like the lines. Not that it isn't that I'm not patient, but it's like I just don't want to stand in the line. I just don't want to. So you could interpret that how you want. But what I'm thinking is that a lot of improvisation had to take. We had to do improvise a lot, and yes, it isn't that those things that you talk about are not necessary because they're meant for a well-rounded person. They're meant for a well-rounded child. But the truth of the fact is that we have to make adjustments. So whereas you might not be able to go swimming or you might not be able to go to piano lessons or whatever, then you must find something now to fill that space, that void. Because of course a void has been created. And we are creatures of habit. And once we are accustomed doing something, the moment that habit gets interrupted, it can now result in something else because it's just like someone that's on substance abuse has an issue with substance abuse. If for whatever reason something comes to disrupt their routine, their structure, then chances are they can revert to that the abuse of substances because what used to occupy or fill that space is missing. So that yes, those things are necessary, but what I found COVID has done, even though it's bad, it has brought about change, as I had said earlier last week, which now caused intuition and initiative and creativity and those kind of things that we thought we didn't have to come to the fore, so that we have enough time now to sit down and conceptualize things. And the truth is that it's all within us, it's all deposited in us, it's all manufactured in us when God made us, but we never got into an environment to cause the things that are in us to emerge, that we can become more valuable and can do more in the earth. But COVID now has thrust us into an environment where those things that God has placed within us get an opportunity to be activated and then to emerge. And so that's why as Deidre was talking about, new businesses and baking and probably a kitchen garden and selling produce and those different things you with your hands, the arts and so on, and you begin to become so creative you wouldn't believe it. And it's because it's another season of our lives. It's another phase of our lives, and what this constant change is a constant. One constant is change, and so we have to be intentional about still making our life matter in COVID. We still have to be intentional about making ourselves valuable and of assistance to others. And as Deirdre rightfully said, the demand for help has escalated, and there are persons who will always need us to reach out to them, and so we still cannot, ball in a fetal position and go under the table and think that we can't take it anymore. We gotta rise. We have to emerge. We have to come out, and with the help of God. Yes, Jesus felt a little uneasy in the garden, and he said, you know what, y'all can watch for me a little while, and he was emotional too. So it tells me that if Jesus, the Son of Man, the Son of God, was emotional, then hey, I can't be emotional. But I don't stay there. I am real with you. I let you know, but I let you know my feelings. But I also know that God has placed within each of us the capacity not just to survive, but to thrive, to overcome. And as that word, that our word that David keeps saying, resiliency. God has given us the power to be resilient. It is within us. So we have to look for it and allow it to work. And it means that we have to be very, very focused and intentional about coming up and climbing out of the hole that some of us have found ourselves in, and to know that you know troubles don't last forever. All right,
Hmm.
tough times don't last forever, but tough people do. And as I said to Deirdre before we started, that storms bring out the eagle. So we call forth the eagles. We command the eagles to
Amen.
arise and to soar and to know that this is not the end. That greater is still ahead of us.
I like that, an eagle's perspective, as we've been sharing this morning. And as we talk about resilience, we often think that we often say children are resilient, but we are also resilient. It has caused us to, as you say, draw on new strengths. Maybe you were able to bake bread and you didn't realize that you can now bake bread, and make some additional income. Looking for the gifts that God would deposit in you. And even in this season, I'm going through, still going through, and I had to go back to Romans 8:28 that says all things work together for our good. And I go like, can this work together for my good, God? This is where you have to take your eyes off of yourself and your present
Yes.
situation and say, okay, God, I mean, this is total surrender, total, complete surrender,
Right.
where it is no longer in your hands, because it's okay when you can navigate it, but when you now have to say, you have to go back to the creator and you say, okay, I want this thing that you have allowed to come to me, because if I'm relying on you, you've got to show me how this thing is going to work together for my good, and not only my good but my children's good too. That's how I've had to learn to 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 draw on the word and make the word now a reality, because we've talked about the word, but now to have to live it out and walk it out, where we have to say, God, now let me see this thing work together for my good, and trust him in the process. This is where your spiritual resilience now arises, because it's not only about what that which we can control, but when we can't control it, it's when we have to really say, God, I have to hold on to you. Because at the end of the day, if you're saying, God, I have to hold on to you, and we've been talking about it, then that which we've lived has now become a lie. So we don't want that which we've lived and we professed to become a lie, but actually to become the truth in our reality that we live out every day. And as Andrea said, someone would be saying, but I don't have a job. I don't have this. And it's been 2 years since we're going into a year. And you're saying that, Marissa, I'm there with you. So I know what I'm talking about. And as Andrea says, and Marilyn O'Neill, good morning to you, Marilyn Currenty. Tough times don't last, but tough people do. And the truth is, we are all going through. Some will never ever say, Deidre, they will never tell you. Andrea, they will never even hint at it. But we are all going through in different spheres in different ways. And the truth is that the only way to manage this is to take it first, one, rely on God, two, one day at a time. I have learned I am not trying to put Friday in Wednesday. I am not. I
Yes.
am in Wednesday, and for the next hour, I know that I have to do this and I have to do that. And if it does not get done, it can roll over to Thursday.
Yeah.
I am so serious, because we've had that fast paced life, and know that things, especially, and Andrew, when you say a line, sometimes you've had to go back two and three times to, I've heard people say they had to go back because the line, you're in the line forever. I'm just saying, you've got to find peace and patience in this process. If not, you will constantly be overwhelmed by the fact that I've had 15 things to do today and my 15 things weren't accomplished. And you go to bed with this thing in your head and you go back tomorrow with it on your head, and it's not working together for your good, because your mental health is not intact either. And your mental and your spiritual go hand in hand. We cannot separate the two.
It's true.
I've had to learn that your mental and your spiritual go hand in hand. If you don't rely on it spiritually, you're not going to manage it physically or psychologically. You're not going to. You're going to find yourself worrying and stressing. And I know you maybe say easier said than done, Marissa, but this is where our total reliance, our resilience is in Christ, and the eagle nature that God has deposited in every one of us will come out in this time. So I'm going to leave some closing words with you, ladies, 60 seconds. And any closing words, Deidre? Any closing words, Andrea?
Yes, my closing words would be that resilience is something that can be built, it's something that can be developed. And again, it comes down to how you cope with a particular situation, a particular challenging situation in your life. There are many steps that can be taken. I mean, some basic ones could be something like regulating your breathing, something like exercise and stretching. And then there are other things that may require that additional assistance from a counselor or professional person. But just know that resilience can be built. You can get to the point of being able to bounce back when something knocks you down. You could be at the point where there's a challenging situation in your life, but you are able to get back up and go again. You can get to that stage. We all can get to that stage. And I'm sure from our sharing this morning, persons can see that yes, we've had challenges. Yes, we've been to that place of being depressed and stressed and overwhelmed. But then there were seasons where we came back to being okay, being able to manage, being able to dig into the Word of God to help us through any particular challenging situation. So there is always help. There is always avenues to build resilience and to grow in any challenging situation.
My challenge, my final words will be to say to those of us listening that God is with us, and He will help us to reconnect with the simplicity of life, and we need to in this season reconnect with the simplicity of life. I think we've lived life so fast paced that we have missed out on the simplicity of life, and learn to live in the moment, so that don't try to live in tomorrow. Learn to live in the moment, and God will give you the strength and the grace. And when we are able to achieve that state of awareness of where we are living in the moment, then we can enjoy also a state of peace. If we try to live it tomorrow, we're gonna be distressed because we don't know what tomorrow holds. We're gonna be frustrated. But when we go through the simplicity of living in the moment, then we are aware of the fact that that sense of peace wells up within us, so that we are remind us of the word of God in St. John chapter 40, when Jesus says, "My peace I leave with you, my peace I give unto you. Not as the world give I unto you. Let not your heart be troubled, neither let it be afraid." I want to say to our listeners today that God has given us a godly heritage, an inheritance, that we must not allow nothing, and that's where our resiliency will come, when we understand that despite all that is happening around us, that the peace of God that surpasses our understanding will keep our hearts and our minds in Jesus in this season of COVID, change, and transition.
I like that. That's a word even for me. That surpasses all understanding. Because we like to think that our understanding has everything covered. But I've learned this life, our understanding is so limited. It's so limited. And the peace of God that surpasses all, it surpasses all, helps us to understand that it's that peace that we must hold on to. It's that peace that will keep us. It is that peace that will help us to be resilient in the midst of it all. I want to say thanks to Deidre. Thanks to Minister Andrea Harris for joining us this morning. Deidre Perch, our social work practitioner. Minister Andrea Harris of the Women of Excellence and Empowerment International Network. Thank you so much for joining us. And to all of you, Sandra, Marilyn, good morning. It's good to have you, Marilyn. I saw Vanita with us this morning. Donna, good morning to all of you. Yes, wherever you are. Maisel, good morning to all of you joining us. Please like before you go, like and share that video, like our video, share it. And I often say you never know just what a word or we share a lot of nonsense. People share a lot of
Yeah.
nonsense, and I say that because sometimes I have to go like, really, but the fact that you can actually share and say to everybody, be encouraged in the midst of it, because too often we think that, sometimes people go through silently and they say nothing, but the fact that we could share this morning our stories and our experiences will help someone else. Good morning to you, Sharon. Good morning to you. So I want to say thanks to all of you this morning for joining us today on our show, and that has been today's edition of Women on Wednesday. Bye bye. From the rib of man you came, mother, daughter, sister, aunt. You are woman. The essence of life is birthed by you. We are all on a journey with our goals in view. Be strong, be empowered today as we present Women on Wednesday.